One of the standards in teaching psychology as a social science teacher in high school is social relations. This includes students being able to discuss and understand topics like stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. In our traditional classrooms, students from various backgrounds will experience learning about social relations very differently. Let's first talk about Ashley. That's me. I'm in my early 20s. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood in greater Boston. I'm able-bodied, cisgendered, straight, and white. The biggest factor that it caused me to experience the negative aspect of social relations, as we described previously, was my religion. I was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in a region where this religion was largely unheard of, therefore creating many different stereotypes about me. Stereotypes are the positive or negative beliefs that we hold about the characteristics of a social group. Stereotypes can be simplified, and usually are simplified, as they are attributed to a group. Bell Hooks, however, grew very differently than me. She grew up in a rural town in Kentucky from a low-income working-class family. Her parents worked as a janitor, her father did, and her mother worked as a maid to a local family. She had 6 siblings. She went to a segregated school and even experienced the transition in the late 60s between segregated school systems and desegregated school systems. While I only saw myself as a member of the church and hardly ever recognized my identity as a woman and how that played into myself, Bell Hooks, on the other hand, was well aware of how her intersectionality impacted her identity. Bell Hooks learned how to talk back in a society where she understood that being a woman meant that if you wanted to earn respect from others, you had to sit still and be quiet. But she refused to do that. She became an accomplished author and academic, and even a wonderful teacher, where she felt like she created the most impact in how she inspired political change. Intersectionality is this idea that our identity cannot be fully understood via one single lens, but in fact is multidimensional. So for me and Bell Hooks, both of us are a woman, which will mean that we will experience sexism in our life. But Bell Hooks is also Black. That combination impacted her life and her identity. While me, being white, also impacted my identity, but in a very different way. So let's take it back to the subject matter, the psychology of social relations. This is a perfect place to see how 2 students, Ashley and Bell, would experience drastically differently were they in the same class. While stereotypes were something that I was very familiar with, prejudice and discrimination were not concepts that I was on the receiving end of. Stereotypes often turn into prejudice when they become an unjustifiable negative attitude or belief about a member that is not a part of your own group. Prejudice will often lead to discrimination, which is unjustified negative behaviors or actions towards a member of a group. Discrimination relies heavily on power. In our current institution, stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination are often taught using long definitions, heavy textbooks, case studies, and sometimes examples from history. While this style may provide space for students like Ashley to discuss prejudice and discrimination, as someone who hardly experiences them herself in the society she lives in, other students who do experience it on a daily basis will be isolated and ostracized in this classroom, as it will be statistically filled with students who are not like them, identity speaking. A way a teacher could combat this is by making the lesson discussion-based rather than lesson-based, and by using different examples from society that are recent and applicable. By using recent examples, and by using a variety of recent examples, we address topics such as intersectionality and include all different backgrounds of our students. Examples of these recent societal examples could be Black Lives Matter, police brutality, gay rights violations and discriminations occurring in countries like Russia, the issue of Confederate statues, the fact that there are 23 out of the 500 Fortune 500 companies that have female CEOs. Being overweight is still acceptably criticized and considered ugly in our society. the impact of 9/11 on American Muslims, and a host of other examples of ways that we can bring discrimination, prejudice, and stereotypes into the classroom and address all different aspects of the identities that our students possess. Bell Hooks is not just a Black student, she's also a female Black student. This overlap of historically oppressed identities shaped her in a way that would not make sense if we looked at them separately. Teachers who teach this subject without including a variety of forms of discrimination and prejudices in society will not be able to create space for all their students. If we make this lesson student-oriented and discussion-based, while providing a variety of modern examples for our students to look at of discrimination and prejudice in action, we can show our students how each of their identities will be impacted and allow them to come to conclusions on how they benefit from discrimination and are victims of it, and what they can do to change that.